Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name's Devon. Thank you for coming to New Hampshire and making the trek out here. We're excited to have such a good turnout and some familiar faces. Um, so I'm here today. I'm just talking about historical societies and what they are, what they do, how they can be useful to you, and how you can be useful to them. There's a lot we can do with our towns and our localities, and there aren't many volunteers. There aren't many people who are interested in these things. Um, so it's good to get involved, and most of all, I think we can all benefit from it too, and your town will as well. So this is the local Nottingham Historical Society, the town. Archives going back 300 plus years. And so if you were looking into this gentleman, John McCoy, and you maybe were looking at his land for something or whatever else, you can learn a lot about him just from this one little soldier's receipt and what he's done, how he's lived his life. And it's all very helpful if that's the route you're looking for. But more importantly, just learning your town, learning your locality can help a lot of things. So you can help make connections with that. On the right here, is a really interesting example. I'm actually going to read it because in case you guys can't read it, but it's very interesting. At Jabig, a very small village under Chubukto, was found by the early settlers. Jabig, by legend and evidence as recorded by deeds, was a junction where several Indian trails from the west and north joined into one, which led from there to salt water at Great Bay. Scattered families of Indians are said to have been found along North and Little Rivers, a splinter fragment or group on the original Pawtuckaway Lake. There is a legend that the center was the site of a large village which was wiped out by smallpox. Skeletons were found. Prominent people. So the Historical Society does a lot of work maintaining monuments, erecting monuments, things of that sense. We have a really interesting one here in the middle. It's in Epsom, New Hampshire, and the Historical Society put that up in 1904. And it was actually where Isabella. settlers, we had Major Andrew McClary in town. He lived in Epsom, New Hampshire. And I was doing a really big research project based on some NEARA. Andrew McClary's brother's house, and Andrew and John lived right across the street. And the Historical Society actually helped me considerably. They even sent me maps. They sent me old documentation of John McClary. And we're actually working on finding a tunnel underneath his house that might have been used in the Underground Railroad. And of course, the Historical Society had this info, but no one had read it. And I read it and sent it back and go, there's 3 different mentions over 70 years of a tunnel. And Kelly and I even went to a gentleman's house and he showed us pictures. That's a little more of a perhaps a useless example, but it just shows you the depth, the clarity of the research, and just how well they documented everything.
Back on, back.
Sorry about the mic issues. So we also have records of cutting wood, moving stones. That's a big one. We have records of people that didn't have rocks in their land, or maybe it had already been cleared, buying rocks from neighbors and having them delivered in piles. It might have been a field 200 years ago, but now it's, there's 80-foot trees and that pile is still there. So a lot of these things that may seem useless, like buying rocks, is actually a huge help for our research and figuring out who the heck built these things and why. Tax info, that's a really interesting one too. Land deeds, that's huge. I'm sure a lot of you guys have looked into land deeds and researched that. Cemetery, burial information, administrative records, stories, pictures, etc. So a ton of records, and there's way more than that's in this slide. If you're ever looking for something and you thought you looked everywhere you could, go to your Historical Society, because they really, either they can help you or point you in the right direction. So how do you get in touch with them? The easiest way is call, email, whatever it may be. Some of them have a Facebook page, but I've found through our adventures, doing research and everything, that the best way to get in touch with anyone is to knock on their door, to go in person, find out what their hours are. Some of them are maybe open 2 hours a week or one weekend a month, something like that. But if you go in, you're going to find people like these people who just are really excited about history, and they may not necessarily know what we're interested in, but they usually become interested and typically are a big help. So I have an interesting story. I was driving home one day and I go by this on the right, this building, the Epsom Public Library, but it's actually the Historical Society now. And I was driving home. It's never open. Literally, they don't have hours. And I'm going to the library to ask them about a root cellar in the area. And the librarian goes, "Oh, well, you just missed her. She just went and she's unloading books at the Historical Society." So I turn right around in my car. I head over there, And sure enough, there were a couple ladies moving books in there, and I knocked on the door, walked right in. They let me in, of course, and we talked for about an hour. They pulled up some chairs, had coffee, and they were really, really excited. So they asked me, why I was looking for this, why I was interested, everything else, and I went through and kind of gave them everyone here has a story of how they got interested, and I started at the beginning, and took about an hour, and next thing you know, they're pulling out records, they're getting boxes out. I mean, right there, then and there on the spot, they were busy doing something else, and they dropped everything and decided to help me, which was very nice. I've stayed in touch with both of those ladies, and they've helped me dozens of times with different projects. So go to the door, knock, see who's there, try to meet your local community, and chances are they'll help you. So they need help too. They have a lot of work, guaranteed. There's a pile of papers that they need scanned or transcribed or something of that nature. And that's beneficial for you too, because now you're going through these documents that people haven't sifted through. And a lot of times they're very interesting. You can see on the right here, you have a handwritten note. That's the neatest one I found in one of the binders I went through. And I mean, some of the writing is just chicken scratch, but it's a good opportunity to learn about your town, figure some more things out, and more importantly, some of these notes are 300 years old, and they're still pretty well maintained. So you can get surprised. You can get surprised. So very, very interesting. But I believe that note right there is actually cemetery information that a local gentleman had been recording. And this one gentleman alone recorded 292 cemeteries in Nottingham, took note of every headstone, and did the genealogy on every person. It took him 60 years, and all of his work is still available. No one scanned it. No one's gone through it. And it's just sitting there handwritten. And now they have a copy. It's a hard copy. Anyone can go there and get it, and it's here to stay. So very useful for you and for them. And that's how a lot of this goes. I'm finding everything I do with the Historical Society is mutually beneficial. So that touches on what we just talked about, but how can a historical society be beneficial to you? Old roads, that's a great thing. If you guys find a structure, something of that nature, you can see, was it on a road? Maybe the road isn't there anymore, but they sure as hell have a map of it. So Native American settlements, villages, you can see how that would be helpful to us. I didn't know that there is a village at Jabig. It's about a mile from our house. And it was actually a major intersection for hundreds of years. So that's good to know. Now I know a little bit more about my area. And land information, previous owners, prior use, these are all things that we've checked out. But I don't know how many of you guys have actually gone to the Historical Society and asked them, because they might be able to help. So another interesting one is old tourist attractions. A lot of times, tourists were interested in what we're interested in. For example, like the Fallensby Rockery down in Andover, Mass. There are structures that people have been visiting for hundreds of years or 100 years or so, and to see what they said about it and what they thought it was and who made it is just as helpful. Sometimes they're onto something. Sometimes they're making stuff up. But yeah, anyway, that's a good place to start, especially if you're looking for points of interest, or in town we have an old pond that now is on private property, but come to find out was a big tourist attraction back in the day. People would come to Boston to go swim in this pond. I don't know why, but in learning things like that, you say, okay, well, there must have been a road there. There must have been and sure enough, that solves the old foundations in the area. And all of these other things where you go, why is there, you know, a foundation here? And this all helps. So the reason I got involved, I actually wasn't trying to get involved with the Historical Society. I was looking for chambers, and I found this one in my town. This is like 2 miles as the crow flies from our house. And I made a couple assumptions here. I assumed that they spelled root cellar wrong, like not as in root cellar, as in where you keep your roots, but they have a little grocery store logo next to that root cellar thing. So I go, this can't be. It's in the middle of the woods. You can see on the right, you know, there's no houses, there's nothing around. I go, I don't think there's a store there. So maybe someone made a mistake, pinned it, and I wanted to check it out. So I go down this road. It's a big long dirt road, and get to the end of it and go, yeah, there's nothing here. And you know, I checked the LiDAR, checked everything else. So I go to the nearest house, and they had posted signs, everything. I didn't bother with them, but this lady up here, I stopped over at her house and knocked on the door. And next thing you know, this little lady opens the door. She was maybe 4'10". I mean, really small lady, and she was a sweetheart. You know, she opened the door. I said, "Oh, come on in," you know, and very welcoming. She asked me to come in before she even knew my name. But she was a really sweet lady. Her name was Margie Varnum, and had actually been involved with the Historical Society for 50, 40 years before now. And I got talking to her. She asked why I was curious about the root cellar. And I asked her, is there a root cellar back here? And she goes, no, my neighbor sells potatoes and beets. So it wasn't that, but either way, I had a great conversation. And then she mentioned her involvement with the Historical Society, and that when she was a kid, when she was 12, keep in mind she was like 84 when I was talking to her. When she was 12, she had been on a bus ride with the Historical Society. Everyone got on a bus, and they went around town and showed you notable houses, notable cemeteries, gave a bus tour. And she said Ed Foss, the gentleman that ran it, would run it for about 8 hours, and people would have to ask to get off the bus because they had to go to the bathroom, they had to eat, and Ed would just talk and talk and talk. And so eventually it became that there'd be a couple people left on the bus and he'd still be talking. And so anyway, I heard the name Ed Foss, and I go, wait a minute, I've heard that name before, but I didn't really make any connections. Needless to say, Ed took her to 4 different chambers in town, and she said they were all along the river. And before that moment, I didn't know that there was one in town. So, you know, sometimes just looking for one thing, you find another, and then we have some info on these things. So this is really, you know, interesting. But next thing you know, she said Ed Foss, she said chambers. Ed Foss started the Historical Society in town, and I go, you know, maybe I ought to go talk to the Historical Society and see what Ed Foss is all about. So here's a NEARA site report from the NEARA site database. And right up here, you got E.O. Foss, 1967. He's in dozens of NEARA site reports. And I knew the name because I'd gone through them, seen them, and I really know that name, but I don't know why. And here's why. This is the chamber he's reporting of. And said it's in Deerfield. It's right on the Nottingham-Deerfield line. And Deerfield used to be part of Nottingham back in the day. So this is what he's referring to in this report. And he said the name and date on the plaque over the entrance does not necessarily indicate the first occupation. Local tradition says it was used as early as 1790 and enlarged from an old Indian stone cave. Roof slabs of 2 distinct types, on left side, granite, round drills, on right, schist, no drill marks. Stone shelves on both left and right interior walls could hold 8 to 10 coffins. So on the inside of this chamber, you have what looks like steps, but they're about 30 inches wide, and you would have stored the dead on these shelves. But it's very clear, if you go inside of this, you can tell there's stone, dry mortared construction behind these big stone slabs that were used as shelves. And if you look up in the ceiling, there's big stone lintels, and in between them, you'll see other stone construction above it. So there were posts added after the fact. I mean, you can tell it's been reworked at least a couple times. So it's interesting to see that where they say it may have been enlarged from an old Indian cave, because otherwise I wouldn't have thought that. It really does look like a tomb. And in the 1700s, building tombs like this was a sign of wealth, a sign of hierarchy. You were a rich, wealthy family if you could build a tomb like this and not be in a family cemetery. So pretty interesting. And this is a really, really awesome chamber too. If anyone's in the area and is interested, I'd love to talk to you about it. But so next thing you know, I go to the Historical Society and I had some questions for them about Ed Foss. And who was he? You know, what was his involvement? And do you have any information on him? So I go to the Historical Society and check out their artifacts and meet some people and notice just how many maps they had. They had literally 100 maps. And every year from 1835 to 1855, the town made a new map. And there might have been one different name on each one, but they still made them. So that's very interesting. But I had a great conversation with her, and the lady Tina that was there, she started asking me, kind of like how Margie did, you know, why are you interested? What are you doing? And I had that conversation with them, and they were very fascinated. As I was walking out, she goes, you know, we have a binder full of everything Ed Foss ever wrote, ever did. She goes, if you want to take it home, go for it. So this binder, I mean, it was this thick and full of all kinds of things. I included pictures of Ed just, you know, in memory of him, but that's maybe 0.5% of what's in that binder. Everything else does not pertain to Ed, and it's just raw research, handwritten notes. In fact, every other slide that's been in here that isn't cited is from that binder. So there's lots of good snippets. And Ed was a little bit of a local celebrity. You know, everyone knew him in town. He was the postmaster for 30 years, and actually did a lot of work for NEARA in these site reports. You know, he reported a ton of sites. So it was interesting that NEARA has some documentation of him, and then I can go to a physical location and they can give me all that much more. And he even had a copy of a letter that he wrote to this gentleman in the bottom right, Andrew Rathovius. He had a bunch of letters to Andrew regarding the chambers, regarding Native American activity. So again, all useful info, and you can just make connection after connection. Once you get a binder like this, you know, it's literally a treasure trove. So I got a lot more than I was expecting. These are just some interesting snippets from that binder. First mill privileges granted to Sean Drown on May 21st, 1729, on South Branch and North River near that's a typo, Bow Street, along with 50 acres of land adjoining, provided he grind all the inhabitants' corn of Nottingham. So they gave him some property, but it wasn't without a cost. But there were only 300 people in town at that point, so that wasn't a whole lot of corn, I suppose. So much charcoal was burned for so many years on Summer Street, the area became and still is known as Smoke Street. It was used as fuel in forges and city fireplaces and as kindling. What's interesting is I had a project or a research I was doing on Smoke Street, because there are about 20 large diameter, perfectly round circles that show up. They're like a detent in the ground in the area of Smoke Street. And they show up like nothing else on LiDAR. You know, you can see this big, perfect round circle, and I go, what the heck is that? And there's 20 of them all around this one area. And I've never seen that. Well, now I know it's a charcoal pit. and they used to burn their coal in there. And, you know, it's a random snippet, but it's certainly a useful one. Very easy to miss in a binder this thick too. So what I did over the time reading this is I would just take a picture with my phone of every page, and eventually that can be used to upload it digitally, but also, which they didn't have. So to be able to give them a file, a raw file with all these scanned pictures, they were psyched. And but also, you know, going through this binder, take pictures, you can search for keywords using your phone, using your computer. So if you have a particular project like Smoke Street, type in Smoke Street and boom, you know, you can find what you're looking for, even if you missed it the first time. And again, that's mutually beneficial. They get a copy, you have a copy to keep once you return it, and as long as they're okay with it, and it's still helping me with my research. So another interesting thing is everyone in town talks about tunnels, caverns, fissures over by Pawtuckaway Lake, and there's a lot of old legends about it and things of that nature. One of the mysteries with the region from northern Nottingham through the town of Deerfield and Candia is the occasional underground noise heard through many years. There's a legend in Nottingham that a large cavern exists somewhere to the Pawtuckaway Range. No one has ever, to the writer's knowledge, found anything other than the Devil's Den on the east end of the North Mountain. This is merely a jumble of granite rocks bearing little resemblance to a true cave. The legend may explain the belief, once prevalent, that there is an underground series of caverns in the area. Well, come to find out, there are underground caverns under North Mountain right by Devil's Den. So the legends were true. But, and here's an interesting snippet as well. Bounty systems used by both British and French, not only for Indian scalps, but also on occasion for white, especially by the French. New Hampshire State Papers, all volumes, also New Hampshire as it is, it's a reference there. But I didn't know that there were bounties for white people as well, but people that couldn't earn their freedom or perhaps committed a crime and were actually put into slavery, even though they may have been born free. Another situation is an immigrant, you know, perhaps someone from another country that didn't quite get their citizenship or something. They might have started as a worker, but really it's a slave. So one of the things we can do is get in touch with our community. And in my instance, they ended up asking, after my little run around with them, they said, hey, can you come in and talk? And sure, it sounds good. So they opened up the old schoolhouse, and we had about maybe 50 people or so come in. It was a great turnout, and everyone was really interested. You know, it was awesome. And it's also cool because I had to make a presentation on sort of my journey through all my research and getting into NEARA. And, you know, of course, NEARA was in my presentation. And there was some interest that came from that. We got a couple new members because of that talk as well. So beneficial for NEARA, beneficial for you and for your town. So I returned the binder, and she goes, you want the next one?
Yeah.
So this one was even thicker, and it was much more detailed. I mean, there were more town records, more land deeds, more censuses, things that a little less stories, a little less legends, and a little less about Ed, and more about just raw data. I still haven't finished scanning this one. This is about 2 months in the work, maybe 3 months now I've had it. And I don't even know if they know they gave it away. You know, it's so laid back at the Historical Society. Look, oh, you want this? You want that? I mean, they really just want to help you. And it's pretty cool to have that sense of community, for one. And for two, you get a couple more people on your team looking for these things that you're looking for and researching, and it's a huge help for everyone. And then the town eventually, you know, will get a report on whatever site we're looking up, and they'll be able to add it to their archives, to their gallery. So very fun. I have fun, at least. It might be not fun to some, but that's my presentation. Thank you guys for coming, and appreciate it. And this is in memory of Margie. Yeah, Margie passed, and fortunately, I got to bump into her at Hannaford's the day before she passed on Christmas Eve. And she asked me to reach up and get cat food for her on the top shelf because she is like this tall. And while I was talking to her for about a minute, she had at least 3 people come up. Hey, Margie Varnum, how you doing? You know, she's like, everyone knows her in town, and she really is a sweetheart. So this is for Margie. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Questions for Devon? Devon, have a few.
Yes. I want to say that I've heard that more settlers captured Indians and made them slaves, maybe putting them on a boat back to Europe, than settlers were captured by Indians.
Yes, there were more. That snippet said on occasion. I think it was just a situation I hadn't heard of. I haven't done a whole lot of research into that particular subject, so I don't want to say too much. But that snippet did say on occasion, so I don't think they were saying that was the norm, so to speak.
When you mentioned captives not wanting to return home, there are a lot of stories about captives. I'm assuming when you mentioned Deerfield, are you talking about Deerfield, New Hampshire?
Yes, sir.
So there was a raid on Deerfield, Mass. From French Canadians coming down, their folks taking these children back.
Yep.
I don't remember the name of the book, but one father of the one girl was a noted minister in Massachusetts. Sent people up there with ransom. She eventually came back with her children later. Hundreds. Dances with wolves, dances with fists. Yeah, maybe not historic, but there's a lot of truth behind that.
Yeah.
There's something about those cultures. It's cool.
Very.
That's very cool.
Right. Maybe we're doing things the wrong way. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, Mike.
Well, not every tribe would treat their captives well, but the Abenaki were known for replacing members of their tribe that were taken or killed by taking people captive, and they'd adopt them into the tribe as a replacement for that person. So some of these people that were taken eventually rose up through the Abenaki tribe. Some of them became chiefs.
No kidding.
Yeah.
No kidding. Yeah, there was an interesting snippet too. It said that there was a Native American settler marriage at one point, about 1740, and the kids, I guess, were sort of both part of the tribe and the town, and they got along well with both divisions, and that was kind of interesting to read, that they could sort of be a tribal member and a community member at the same time, and go to school, but then go home to the tribe. So that's, yeah, very interesting.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much.